Someone finding you attractive puts you on top of the world. And one of the things that happens when you're depressed is you think nobody finds you attractive.
Welcome to episode 10 of Trigger Proof. My name is Dr. Nima Rahmany. It's a pleasure for me to be here in my own kitchen. Our studio had to move around, so here we are. We're close to a cruise ship terminal. There's ambulances downtown here that come by, and it's a live broadcast, so we're gonna have to make do, and hopefully it works out great because we have a really interesting show. Also to boot, I was delivering a weekend workshop this weekend, and my voice is completely gone, but the show must go on, especially this topic. We are talking about taming infidelity. Now, you might be wondering, what the heck is a chiropractor doing talking about this topic? And it's very interesting. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that I would end up speaking about this topic and sharing, but I couldn't ignore it. It came up so much in the clients that we work with. We had to address it and help give some tips to be able to take precautionary measures so that you don't end up having your entire family completely torn apart, your self-esteem, your confidence, all of these things that can happen if we don't take the proper precautions. Kind of like fire, infidelity works the same way. Now, as a chiropractor, patients are coming to see me with stress-related disorders. The point of this show, Trigger Proof does not mean trigger less. It means becoming responsible for your triggers so that we can expand that space between stimulus and response so that we can not only benefit our health, we can benefit our relationships and business and career as well, because your reactivity completely blocks intimacy, and over time, those destruction of your relationship structures can actually impact your health. So as a chiropractor, patients are coming in with stress-related disorders, and as I would go upstream, usually what I would discover is that these stress-related disorders have relationships at their root cause. And when you dive in a little bit more and understand what's going on, as my career evolved from practitioner of chiropractic to teacher and coach and mentor, we saw that infidelity was one of the greatest causes for most client relationship breakdowns. And when we dug in a little bit, we saw that infidelity wasn't the cause. Infidelity is an effect, and we're gonna have a neurobiology and neuroscience professor and brain researcher to come and share a little bit about that today. Now, when you see, the thing is, everybody gets in relationship because we want connection. We want to feel seen, we want to feel heard, we want to experience love and share a shared experience. We want to be loved for exactly who we are. But the problem is, that's what makes life worth living. But the problem is if I do not appreciate all the parts of myself, or I have not gotten complete with all the parts of myself, then I am likely going to walk around in a kind of covert shame and put on a mask for other people around me so that I don't risk being rejected. And that is no different even in long-standing marriages. We've had clients who've been in relationships for 5, 10, 15 years and still not have the courage to be able to speak openly and honestly to their partners. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Now, when we don't learn these tools of upgrading our intimacy, clearing our shame, learning how to regulate our own nervous systems, what happens is we have inauthentic relationships. We don't appreciate ourselves, so we assume that the other person isn't going to love us for who we are, so we hide and kind of conceal certain parts of ourselves. Let me know if any of this is relating to you. In fact, please, by all means, ask any questions, and I want this to be as interactive as possible. I have my screen down here, and I want to answer as many questions as possible. So, fear of disapproval is one of the biggest challenges that block us from being able to have that intimacy with others. So when we don't have that intimacy, we hide, and then what happens is we become vulnerable to our partners or ourselves feeling seen and heard by another. And welcome to a perfect storm for infidelity to happen. Now, one of the bigger causes and challenges for you to be able to share who you truly are is unresolved past sexual shame. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, if we don't get this right and we don't clear and we don't do the necessary inner work, then we suffer from intimacy disorders. We have sexual compulsions that are concealed, that aren't shared with our partner, and then all of a sudden relationships start to break down, and then your health starts to break down, businesses start to break down, because you never had a business problem without a personal problem. And so this transcends everything. It's how you relate to yourself and others. It affects your health, your business, and of course, your external relationships. So when we don't get this right, we have no intimacy, you have a wall up, and infidelity becomes the result. So the process we take our clients through, something that I've been sharing since episode number 1, and I go over it briefly each and every time. It's what we call an intimacy upgrade. And the first step is to learn how to regulate your nervous system. Through breath work, through breath, through exercise. Chiropractic care helps a lot. Habits and rituals and living according to your highest values. Episode number 2, we talk a lot about that. And what's very important here is also to clear your past resentments and with your mother and your father, with your past lovers, clearing your resentment towards yourself, very important as well, because when you don't get that part right, Freud calls it the repetition compulsion. You will find yourself consistently falling into the same patterns. I'm going to share with you a story that just will blow your mind, that actually has unresolved past resentments written all over it. And the third part here is ego shadow work, learning how what we call to dance with your dark passenger. That little voice, that little part of you that feels like it's not enough, it's there with you at all times, and learning how to mitigate that. And we talked about this on our last episode with Sean Stevenson. This is the root cause of all of your insecurities. So learning how to dance with that dark passenger, when you don't get that right, it's running your life and you're sabotaging all of your relationships, which we talked about on our last episode. Now, when you regulate your nervous system and you've cleared your past resentments, you're able to be present with yourself. And you're able to be present with your partner, you're able to be present with your clients. When you learn to clear those past resentments and you learn how to dance with that dark passenger, what we discovered this weekend, you develop this incredible understanding towards that other person, where resentment and shame and turns into compassion for that other person, and it's very heart-opening, it's very beautiful to watch. And then you turn around and then you have a deeper understanding and love for yourself as a result of that, when you get that part right. And when you've learned how to dance with your dark passenger and you've regulated your nervous system, this is when people will start to tell you, you seem like the real deal. It seems like I'm talking to a real person. You seem very grounded, you seem very authentic, and this is the window to achieving true fulfillment. And this can't be achieved without empathic communication. Learning how to consciously empathize with another person, not unconscious empathy, not giving up yourself to completely please another, but to be able to feel another person's feelings and understand them, while at the same time being able to be grounded and centered within yourself. So it's not an unconscious empathy, it's a very conscious one. And it can't happen without a commitment to resolving it. And it also helps to have a community behind you, because the one-on-one therapies are very important. However, more and more research is showing how we co-regulate. We regulate in community. And so it's important for you to find a community to do all that. And all of this is the intimacy upgrade, which results in greater love in your life, which is really why we're here. So the reason why I wanted to talk to you about this is one of the clients reached out to us, let's call her Holly, reached out to us, and she was suffering from extreme amount of anxiety and panic attacks. And when I got her on a call, I asked her, I said, okay, so when did they start? And she said, 1 year ago, after I woke up from my hysterectomy surgery, I've been suffering from debilitating anxiety and panic attacks. So she jumped into our intimacy upgrade. And on our first call, I told her, I said, all right, tell me what's going on. Tell me the story. It turns out that 7 years prior, she had an affair on her husband. She walked in on her husband watching pornography, and in that moment decided that she was not enough for him. So how did she cope with that? She decided to call her old high school sweetheart and start an affair because he always made her feel enough. So she begins this infidelity. She begins this extramarital affair, not letting her husband know, and a few months in starts to develop spotting, symptoms of vaginal spotting, bleeding. Goes to the doctor and said, you could be developing endometriosis. And so to make a long story short, over these 7 years, she was in and out of the doctors and specialists and hospitals, and this endometriosis started advancing and advancing, and what was happening was the entire time she was advancing her extramarital affair with her high school sweetheart, not letting her husband know about it. Now, talk about clearing past resentment. Let me share with you something that she had going on in the background. She was holding on to an anger towards her father. She was holding on to an anger towards her father because he had cheated on her mother. And that resistance and that anger towards her father, she held on to. And whatever you resist persists, whatever you condemn, you breed. And lo and behold, here she was acting out what she was resenting in her father. Let me know if you can relate to anything that I'm saying right now. So this was kind of bumbling in the background. And so what we discovered was her endometriosis advanced to the point where her doctors suggested that she have a hysterectomy. In other words, what was happening was her body was physically this is gonna sound woo to some of you, but I've seen it enough, and I've been in practice for 18 years, and I know anything is possible, and your physical body is gonna manifest any unresolved emotion that you're holding on to. And that unresolved anxiety, that unresolved guilt was manifesting in her uterus until the point that she was called on to take it out. And the day after she took it out, wakes up from surgery and realizes that there was no organ to act out with bleeding and pain, her unresolved guilt. So lo and behold, what was the next best thing for the body to create in order to distract her from that guilt? Answer: anxiety. So when I discovered this, and she had tried everything, she'd gone to every doctor, psychiatrist, she's gone to psychologists, everywhere, they were trying to deal with the anxiety. Whereas what I discovered was anxiety is a distraction for a lie, an inauthenticity, an error, a lie of omission or commission, which, lo and behold, we see all the time in relationships with infidelity. So, interestingly enough, that infidelity had an impact on her health, which is what I'm concerned about. So we went upstream to the root cause. First thing we did was we cleared past resentment. Now, what do I mean by clearing past resentment? What I mean by clearing is I created a tool, a self-inquiry tool called the overview method that helps clear past resentments by seeing how it served, by opening your heart to the possibility, by seeing, by owning your part of a challenge or a trauma, by taking responsibility and opening your heart to love. We cleared the resentment for her father, cleared the shame and resentment from herself, and saw that that was a coping strategy that she used, and saw the innocence of that. Then she went back to her husband and her whole family and shared everything that was going on and what happened as a result based on our coaching. And lo and behold, her anxiety was gone. So, we weren't treating her anxiety. It was all because of this hidden conflict, and she decided to upgrade her intimacy. So it's got an impact on your health. And when you don't really learn the mechanisms behind why we are why we have a tendency to have infidelity. I think it was Dan Savage who has a video blog about it. He says it's like 80 to 90% of relationships. I'm sure Dr. Jim's gonna share a little bit more with us. But it's so common. It's usually like the norm. So why is it that we're so broken up about it? Why does it destroy our lives? And how can we use it to our advantage? To answer that question, I have a special guest on our show. I'm just going to introduce him right now. Dr. Jim, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Jim, I want to introduce who Jim is. So why is he here? Jim's a professor of neuroscience and psychology who's conducting research at the Brain Research Center in the University of Veracruz in Mexico. He also was a professor at Concordia University as well. We met through a mutual friend. He's the former president of the International Society of Sex Research, and he's the editor of the journal Current Sexual Health Reports, and he's authored over 200 papers and chapters in peer-reviewed journals in topics from neurochemistry and molecular biology of sexual desire and sexual reward and pleasure, all the way to the mechanisms by which mammals form sexual pair bonds and partner preferences. Wow, that's quite a mouthful. That's quite a handful.
And you got it out of your mouth, which is great.
Speaking of which, Jim, why is it that you love talking about sex so much? Can you share that a little bit, Cheris? Tell us a little bit about why you love talking about sex so much.
I mean, honestly, I always have. Sex is the top of the hierarchy, really. Species survival depends on it. Relationships, the pleasure in relationships depends on it. People's own self-definition and their self-worth really in some ways depends on them being able to be attractive to someone else. Someone finding you attractive puts you on top of the world. And one of the things that happens when you're depressed is you think nobody finds you attractive. And your own self-concept begins to diminish under those circumstances. So I think that, the sexual outlet, which is probably the most pleasurable thing other than, taking certain drugs of abuse, it's really among the things that define us and define our self-worth as human beings. So I think sex, understanding sex from, arousal, desire to orgasm to, the beautiful cuddling that comes afterward and how the anticipation of that makes you feel. And the fact is, there's billion-dollar industries that exist in this world that surround sex. Surround sex toys, that surround porn, that surround everything that we do sexually. So it's a weird thing.
And you're so fascinated that you went into like the neurobiology of sexual desire and what causes us to pair bond and infidelity and all of this stuff. So, you went granular on this whole sex thing.
Well, you kind of had to, because I remember self-disclosure, very first orgasm. I hope people in your viewing audience can remember that experience, because what on earth was that? Your body never did it before. You have no idea what it is. And I remember as a young teen just thinking to myself, what was that? And guess what? Nobody had an answer. Nobody knew what an orgasm was. They didn't know what the refractory period afterwards was. They had no idea. Masters and Johnson, years before had come out with their kind of human sexual response cycle, and orgasm was described as a release of tension, right? A release of sexual tension. And I'm thinking to myself, what's tense? What are they talking about, tension? What is this tension? And it occurred to me that it has to be in the brain. The body, of course, does what the brain tells it to do, but and the body is the ultimate expression of that. But the tension and the anticipation and the arousal and the desire and the pleasure itself is all in here. This is your number one sex organ.
And so since teenage years, Jim, sorry to interrupt you then, that feeling then runs most people's lives. I mean, it ran my life for a great deal. I mean, I talked about this earlier on. You and I shared this on a phone call a couple weeks ago, but that becomes sometimes a compulsion that we need. And then we get into relationships with somebody saying that this is going to be the person that's going to deliver that feeling to me. And it doesn't always go according to plan, does it? And all of a sudden, it just causes a great deal of destruction in our relationships, in our lives.
Well, especially because one of the ways that our brains are formed is around this, and this is really part of brain wiring that allows this to happen, is around the idea that we make an external cause for our internal state. So if you want to think what I mean by that, we don't take ownership of our own pleasure, of our own orgasms, for example, or of the food that someone prepares that tastes good. In fact, it's your own sensory physiology that as you eat that food, you feel it, taste it, your brain is processing it as, oh my God, that's like the best creme brulee I ever had. But in fact, you blame the person who made it for the state that you're in. And likewise,
instead of the sensory organs that are perceiving it.
Exactly. And so likewise, we say, you make me feel so good. And that's a huge responsibility for another human being who has his or her own sensory physiology to be the one who is going to be the knight in shining armor, or the dastardly devil who doesn't do the deed.
Rescue me, to be the magical one to fill whatever I'm missing inside.
I'm afraid that's and it's a huge problem. And I think it's apropos that we're discussing infidelity today, because part of the reason for infidelity are because of these expectations that we tend to bring into our lives.
And so we get into these relationships and we have these expectations and we have these covert, hidden shames, hidden, judgments of ourselves, insecurities, and they're covert. They're not brought to the surface. In our program, we like to discuss them and kind of bring them out to light, because shame can't exist in the dark, right? But can you talk a little bit about, how we kind of made some notes here, how we can tame that infidelity monster? Because we talk about novelty, we talk a little bit about, after a while, your partner is there, just not doing it for you anymore. And then somebody at the office, or with this whole digital age, with the Tinder and the swiping left and right, and you can get your needs met very easily and not have to deal with the challenge at home and the boredom that ensues and all of that stuff. So what can we do to tame this infidelity monster? And let's get granular and let's get into the neurobiology of it.
Sure.
So that first one we talked about, can you talk about sexual shame and trauma, and unresolved sexual shame and trauma, and how that impacts our relationships?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that I think in most human cultures really have a problem with free sexual expression. And, for good reason. Nobody wants to go on a bus and have half the bus masturbating. I mean, it's kind of if you think about the image of what that is and how uncomfortable you're going to feel about that, and that's coming, I think anybody would feel that way. The other thing, though, that happens is people learn very subtly that they shouldn't touch themselves, that and if they do it, it's got to be done in private. Things that is bad, sex is bad, masturbation is bad, and why masturbate when you have a partner? Why look at porn and masturbate when you have a partner, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that enter into sex that are shameful and that people regard as shameful. And one of those is their own sexual expression. What do you like? Well, to answer that question, you got to know what your darkest, deepest fantasies are. And those can be quite revealing, as being things that you do not want anybody else to ever know. Yeah. So, totally. and I mean, we've been through this with, on a kind of a macro level with, homosexuality. We've been on this with BDSM, but everybody's got a bit of shame about their body. Is your body, and even if you're the most free sexually expressing person on the planet, is your body good enough? Do you look hot enough? Are you thin enough? Do you have the six-pack enough? Are your legs good enough? Are you tall enough? Are you, and if we think of, women's sexual self-esteem or just self-esteem in general, are you as a person good enough? And all of that has a sexual root to it.
Yeah.
So you can imagine
and we're bringing that into the relationship.
Oh yeah.
And it's not talked about.
We never get rid of it unless we talk about it. And it's hard to do, right? I mean, how traumatic is it for a 6-year-old girl who discovers the faucet in the bathtub, and she's not masturbating in an adult way, but oh my God, the water coming down feels really good on her clitoris, or feels good on the boy's penis. And, the parents come in and they see this and they freak out. Now, it's not a sexual trauma like a rape, but it certainly is a traumatic experience that she's going to bring forward to say, well, my pleasure around there is something I shouldn't deal with. It's bad. I shouldn't do it. I shouldn't discuss it. In addition, very few cultures have a language with which to easily discuss sex. I mean, the words we use, vagina, penis. I mean, vagina is the scabbard you put your sword in. A penis actually means tail. And things are very inaccurate. They're very inexact. And it's very hard to use that language when even the word vagina is something that people can't say in polite company. So how do you ever talk about your sexual life?
Totally.
How do you ever talk about, especially the things that you feel guilty about?
So we clear that past sexual shame and trauma. That's the first step, because
Right.
I mean, this is what we always say to our clients, and what I share is that if you haven't cleared your past resentment, you're basically bringing them into your next relationship, and so they're going to play out somehow, right? So that's our first step, and I created a kind of methodology for that. Now, the second part is how to tame infidelity from a neurobiology perspective. Don't let it get habitual. Talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely.
Jim?
So I think, imagine the first date. Imagine how excited you are on that first date, and you are bringing all that other stuff into it, but you're really excited. And lo and behold, things get connected, things start happening, flirtatious glances are made, you even break the ice and touch each other, give each other a kiss. Ultimately, the second date, third date, whatever the end date is, ends up in the two of you having sex.
Okay.
All the excitement of that somehow gets forgotten as soon as the couple becomes not only just a couple, but they move in with each other.
Yeah, and it's gone after the kid.
Oh my God, right? Because
after the kid, frickin' forget it.
Now you got other things to do.
You've
got other things to deal with. You've got.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, when sex becomes habitual, you do it the same way every Friday night at 11:30 when the evening news signs off, in the dark, in the same positions. It gets boring.
Yeah.
The excitement isn't there. In fact, all the foreplay that either one in the couple might really want and desire isn't there anymore, because who needs it? Now you're living together. And once you're together, you don't have to date anymore. Well,
let's just get right to it.
Is the kiss of death for sex.
Okay.
Just like it would be for food. I mean, if you ate the same thing every night, you're going to get bored of it. And I remember in grad school, that was something we had to do because we were starving grad students. But it was one of those great lessons. It's like, oh my God, we would never do, other than grad school, to feeding what we do to sex.
So you're talking about dopamine, right? The dopamine completely wears off. So how do I make sure that the dopamine doesn't wear off in my long-term relationships?
Well, dopamine is an interesting and very interesting neurochemical and very close to my heart because I did my thesis on it. It's very important. Dopamine is the driver toward reward. It is it's not reward itself, but it's the neurochemical that in different parts of your brain drives you to seek out things that are rewarding. And that which increases dopamine will increase the likelihood of your behavior being focused on seeking out a rewarding stimulus. What is a rewarding stimulus? Well, if it's this person that you've been living with for 5 years that you're having crappy sex with, you've actually developed a decrease in your dopamine release in response to that person who is your partner. In fact, it's much easier then to get an increase to somebody new who starts flirting with you.
There you go. And
there's an increase, right?
And there's the problem right there, because
That's right.
it's harder work to get it with your current partner than it is,
Right.
which is why we're so prone to infidelity. Would you say?
I mean, I think because we're a visual species, visual and auditory mostly. I mean, we're also tactile and olfactory and everything else, but the visual and auditory system at a distance can valence when someone's flirting with you. And if your partner would just keep on flirting with you, everything would be fine. But that, of course, requires you to be flirting with your partner.
And be flirt-worthy. You got to be taking care of yourself.
Well,
you
yeah,
gotta be,
exactly.
You got to be paying attention to those things, like if you're dating that person and trying, we're vying for that affection, right?
Well, you bring up dating. That's a very important point, because I think what couples forget to do is continue dating. Mm-hmm. And among the things dating does is it gives you dopamine system, what's called the big driver of dopamine, which is a reward prediction error. Now, that's a term we use in neurobiology. When an animal is, or you are, going to the candy machine and you put in your money and you press the button and the candy doesn't come out, you're like, whoa, wait a minute, that's not fair. So you press harder, and if you're a rat, you bar press harder, and you're going to do more to get that reward that you just paid for. Why? Because your dopamine system is now mobilizing.
You put in some effort,
motor output to do it, and you're going to put in more effort, and more time spent in between what you expect increases the reward prediction error. So, if you don't know when something's going to happen, like say you have a long distance relationship, you may see each other every 2 weeks, but even though every 2 weeks is every 2 weeks and it's habitual, the fact that you're not having it every night means you anticipate.
So would you say it's healthy to take a break from sex, like to stop doing it for a while, or just say, listen, you do your own thing, let's spend some time apart? Is that what you're saying?
That's one way the couples deal with it. Another way they deal with it is having date nights where they actually go out with each other without the kids, not worried about it. The kids are at grandma and grandpa's. They're out on a date. And that date can end in a hotel room. Not going back home where all the contingencies are there that says, oh, well, we're going to do it in a habitual way. Now they're in a hotel room, and they don't care what mess they leave in the hotel room. Couples can also do things that don't involve the bedroom. I mean, sex is not just a bedroom escapade. It can be done in the kitchen, in the living room, in the basement, on the washing machine. It can be done
the Costco lineup. I mean, anywhere, right?
Anywhere. And flirtation can be done anywhere, right? So that's how you keep it fresh. You want to keep it fresh. You want to keep it fresh. And you can come up with anything. You can go out on a date, role play, have her go to a bar an hour before. You come there and she's like surrounded by guys, and you're going to be the one she's going to pick. You're going to buy her a drink and you're going to flirt. But you got to flirt with her in a way that she is going to flirt back. And you role play this game, you are going to feel like you are the stud of the century, have taken this woman that you just picked up in a bar to this hotel room, and you're going to have amazing sex as a result of that.
Very cool. All right.
So you got to keep it fresh.
Keep it fresh. Don't let it get habitual. Number 3 is a pretty tough one for a lot of people because of the shame, right? Being honest with yourself about what you prefer, what your preferences are.
And shame has a lot to do with not being honest with yourself, but in addition, not knowing your body. So, I often tell my undergrad classes in hormones and behavior, women kind of don't know their genitals. They know the rest of their body. And everybody says, well, women are more sensate focused. No, the genitals aren't that important, which of course they are. Men, on the other hand, have a big problem because they know their penis, but they have no idea about the rest of their bodies. So you ask, I can ask men in my class to say, well, what about nipple stimulation? What about, earlobes and getting your necks? And they're like, yeah, what are you talking about? It's all about the penis, no? Well, no, it's not.
Don't touch my nipples. What are you doing touching my nipples?
Your body is a one big erogenous zone, and the things that you can feel and get shivers about in a sexual circumstance or context, those become wonderful. But the problem is people don't explore. And the exploration in yourself, the self-exploration, it sexually is the thing that a lot of people don't do. They simply expect their partner to come riding in on a white horse and give them an orgasm. Right?
Or they're
but
not
again,
honest,
remember,
or they're not honest with what they really want, because
That's right.
they think it's going to be perceived as not, not appropriate. They won't go for it. So they don't. It's almost like they shut down. Like, I've worked with people who've literally shut down their own sexuality because they haven't given themselves permission to be honest with themselves about what they want and then communicate things.
And in a way, we have great lessons from the gay community, from the BDSM community, where people come out. What does coming out mean? It means you reveal who you really are and what you really want. You reveal it sexually, you reveal it socially, you reveal it in many different ways. But that revelation to yourself and to be able to express that to others then becomes the idea, the kernel of being honest with yourself.
Totally.
It's an incredibly important thing to do. So what do you like? If you're getting bored because you're doing the same stuff, talk about it immediately.
Yeah.
Don't wait a year or 5 years or 10 years.
Which goes to point number 4. Once you've been honest with yourself, communicating that to your partner, scary as all hell for a lot of people. We literally watch people who are like shaking about talking to their own partners.
Sure.
And it's like, how is it that you're supposed to have intimacy when you can't be honest with yourself? You haven't cleared your own shame, aren't honest with yourself, and then you can't communicate that to somebody else.
Nima, it's a very important point, because I think that communication, and it's not, will get you to communicate. The marital therapy is all about learning to communicate with each other, and that's great. But if there's a sexual issue around you expressing what you like, or you even feeling guilty by telling your partner what you might like, and there's a lot of guilt surrounding that. Like, I don't want to hurt his feelings. He just doesn't go down on me properly. I don't want to hurt her feelings, but whacking my penis against her cheek just doesn't do it for me, even though she saw it on a porno and thinks it's going to be the best thing since sliced bread. It just isn't happening. But what do I tell? Do I tell her that that's not happening, or just let her do it and then make her think that that's really turning me on? And couples who get to that point, I think, really need a specific sex therapy intervention where they can express what they need and what they like in a way that doesn't accuse the other person of not pleasing them. And that's what we do. We get punitive about it. We say, well, you don't do me right. You see this in sex therapy with a couple of the anger that you're talking about, that anger that you bring into things, is there for the partner, because all these expectations of things that you had in the past that you've lost. I lost it because you aren't giving it to me anymore. Well, in fact, you can say, oh, I really like it when you do this, or I really, you can make it a positive thing. And
focus on intention and positive rather than what you don't want and how they're not doing it for you.
That's absolutely right. And people have to remember that reward and pleasure are what you're going after, not punishment and like negative reinforcement. You're going after
unless you're into that sort of thing. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, but I'm talking about good punishment, not bad. Here I'm talking about bad punishment, right? And the punitiveness that you have with your partner, saying your partner isn't doing you. In fact, your brain is your brain. Your orgasms are in your brain, not in your partner's brain. They're not even necessarily in your partner's behavior. In fact, if your partner's lying there, you can move your body to make things happen too. So it's obviously sex is a blend. It's something you do with yourself, it's something you do with a partner or many others. But the point is, it's something that you are blending different brains into a single experience with. And so to be able to talk to somebody and tell what you like is a really important thing. So communication is a key.
And then the last one here, being open to your partner's suggestions. I remember one of my partner had a fantasy that she wanted to put a strap-on and to, and I was like, okay, so Jim, what am I supposed to do? Are you saying that I should actually be open to that, and that even though the idea of it absolutely terrifies me?
As long as you can get her to be gentle, Many things that women tell us: be gentle, be gentle. And you're like, yeah, whatever. Well, if you can be gentle, she can be gentle.
Okay, here we go.
But, exploring your body is among the other things that are among the things that you need to be able to do to know what you like. If you don't like it, you tried it, you didn't like it. But what if you do? What if your prostate sitting there full of nerves, waiting to be palpated, and when you get it palpated, you'll love it? Now,
okay, I'll get back to you on that.
It's not, but it's interesting because when you talk about prostate, a lot of heterosexual men will say, well, having a finger up my ass is gay. And it's, it's like they can confabulate and conflate all these different things. But the fact is, your partner's a woman, she's doing this to you. How gay is that? Is it lesbian for you to go down on her? It's like, no, it's what guys do. Yeah, but so does a lesbian's partner do that as well. It's not gay or lesbian or anything, it's just sexual. And to be open to having these experiences then becomes something that you can do to elevate your own arousal.
Beautiful.
So
these are some very, very valuable tips that, I'm hoping, my intention is that as a couple, especially if you've gone through infidelity and you're working to repair or build back up, or you're just talking to each other because you want to prevent that from happening, that you can watch this and really spark up a conversation. And we can't talk about infidelity, Jim, without talking about jealousy.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the neurobiology of jealousy, because it's a duality that I've experienced with people, is that with our clients, as soon as they find out about an infidelity, the first thing that happens, like, they're horrified and they go into this, insecure place of what, am I not enough? Right. Yet on the other hand, if they can be truly honest, the idea of their partner who's been with you for 15 years and you've had kids with, and things might have gotten a little stale and whatnot, I asked them the question, have you noticed that since then your attraction towards your partner has gone up? And they're ashamed to admit it, but it's true. It happens. It's kind of like this awakening. So I always say infidelity is either your ticket out of the relationship, which you've always wanted, or it's a way back in. And jealousy, you got to learn a little bit about, you have to learn how to mitigate and understand jealousy. Can you talk a little bit about the neurobiology of jealousy?
Sure.
Because it's fascinating.
Sure. I mean, I'll give you a concept. I give your watchers a concept. Jealousy is like nuclear power. You can use it. You can use it to charge your relationship, or you can use it to obliterate it. And
amazing analogy.
Jealousy will do that. And part of jealousy, it's not. I mean, we tend to think of it as ownership. Oh, you're jealous of me because you think you own me, right? But really, jealousy comes when you form a pair bond. Now, how do we form pair bonds? Through the activation of oxytocin. Oxytocin is under the control of many different neurochemicals, but at orgasm, oxytocin is among the neurochemicals that are released not only into the body, but into the brain. Now, if you are in hookup culture and you get up and go, you're going to be experiencing that oxytocin rush, like your opioid rush and everything else that's happening, in your car driving home, which is, there's nothing in there for you to bond to. But if you are, the antithesis of hookup culture is, of course, the thing that violates it, which is what gets you into a relationship in the first place, when you just can't not cuddle this person.
You stick around and you cuddle now.
Stick around and you cuddle. And oxytocin is making that happen. Oxytocin is personifying reward. It's actually putting you into this mind space or head space, which is the neurochemically based space, where this individual is yours. All right? You are mine. It's
ownership.
It's partly that, but really it's like we're connected now in a way that I'm not connected to anyone else, right? And oxytocin is very important for, monogamy, parental monogamy, when the parents actually stay together to raise the young, in many, many different species. And in fact, it turns out that our rat work has shown, because rats are promiscuous, but very easy Pavlovian manipulations put these rats into states of pair bondedness that we see in prairie voles and that we see in some humans. So what it means really is that we've got both systems in our brain, to be promiscuous and to show fidelity, right, with one partner, so long as that is maintaining itself. But the dark side of that is that if that partner strays,
then it's painful.
The fear of the loss of that personified reward to you is
It's
that
unbearable for
you start, and you either get very depressed, which some people will kill themselves, or you get very domineering in a way that makes you not only angry, but makes you then say, like the woman that you spoke of initially, I'm going to go do it too. If he's doing it, I'm going to do it. If she's doing it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to level
try
that
to dominate. Yeah.
And that's a disaster when that happens. It doesn't have to be, but it quite often is, because then it's like, well, you strayed. Yeah, so did you. And then, and you lied to me about it. You've been doing it for a long time. I asked you where you were. You lied, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then you've got trust issues to deal with. I mean, the whole house of cards begins to come down into those things. But recognizing that a little bit of jealousy also is very arousing. You know, when you think of your partner having sex with someone else, and you think of your partner as, a porn star, you think of your partner as, you can fantasize about this any way you want, but it makes you have to work harder, doesn't it?
So what you're saying,
going to stop your partner from having sex with somebody else, you're going to have to be fit and fitter.
Step up your game.
You're going to have to step up your game. You're going to have to date this person. You're going to have to give this person flowers when she doesn't expect it, or do things, buy things, and take her places that she doesn't expect. Blindfold her, put her in the car, say, I'm taking you somewhere. I'm not telling you where until we get there. Right? Little things that you can do to take what would be jealousy and turn it into nuclear power.
Right. So basically, what you're saying is, if you have a good pair bond, you're not going to get rid of jealousy, but with some conscious awareness, we can use it to our advantage to help keep things really spicy and prevent and help do things that will help mitigate the whole risk of this infidelity that can happen.
Absolutely.
Just using your this is about, it's about using neuroscience to your advantage. And if we understand the mechanisms of it, then we can actually take action steps with conscious awareness rather than just being at the effect of our impulses.
Right.
Which is what Trigger Proof is all about.
Jealousy is an expression of fear. Now, it can be an expression of fear of getting caught in terms of what you're doing yourself. So you come home after, going to a conference in which you cheated, and immediately accuse your partner of having cheated while you were away. That's usually a telltale sign of people doing.
Can you talk a little bit about that? There's two types of jealousy. We talked about this yesterday. This is very important for everybody to really get. Where you talked about, like, I wrote it down because it was so profound. You said that jealousy, most of the people who are the most jealous are the ones either doing it or want to do it, or it's the other type of jealousy with low self-esteem. Right. Can you talk about those two?
Sure. So the first type is kind of a return of the repressed. Like you see your own infidelity in others, and especially in your partner. So if you've done it, the guilt that you feel is so overbearing that you project it onto your partner, right? Who is the person you feel the guiltiest about, right, in terms of your behavior. The other type is one where self-esteem is very low. Somebody who feels insanely jealous that their partner is always going to be cheating on them, may have been cheated on in the past, or not, as the case may be, may simply, empathize with people who have been, to the point that they think, well, why would she love me anyway? I'm kind of depressed and kind of ugly, and I don't know why anybody would find me attractive. And somebody with self-esteem like that is very easily going to be triggered by anything that he or she suspects is an indication that their partner might be cheating.
And would you say, like, this might sound a little woo, but would you say that somebody walking around with this low self-esteem and is consistently beating themselves up and seeing them a certain way, the world will, I mean, it's kind of like, it's not their fault, but they have a more higher probability of that happening if their partner just kind of like believes in their lack of self-esteem. You know what I mean?
And we call this a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? That you're actually going to bring it about, because you're going to be harping on it to the point that your partner's going to, what is wrong with you? Like, why, and you're not going to say, oh, because I don't think I'm attractive enough for you, and I think you may, find somebody better than me. You're going to say, well, I don't know. I don't
Because
feel that. And
because
it's
you're
going to
this,
be
you're
very
that.
hard to exactly, right? And you're so good looking, or worse, well, you have a history.
There you go.
You've been with
You
many
bring
more
the
people
past
than I have, and so this all comes out, and it just, it's the antithesis of having any kind of pleasure in your life, because you're constantly taking what could be a really beautiful, pleasurable experience and turning it into this horrible negative reinforcer, where it's like, well, okay, I got by another day where he didn't cheat on me. Oh, I got by another day where she didn't cheat on me. And it's like, no, you can't live day to day like that. That's no relationship. That's living in a prison cell.
Thank you. So basically, we just talked about how jealousy is kind of in our hardwiring, in our neurochemistry, and that's part of pair bonding.
Yep.
And we absolutely, if we are well resourced within ourselves and we're conscious, we can actually use that jealousy to our advantage and use it to kind of expand intimacy and deepen our connections. And these 5 kind of tips that you shared with us, clearing the past sexual shame and trauma, do not let it get habitual, mix it up quite a bit, be honest with yourself and what you prefer, what your preferences are, learn how to communicate them empathically to the other person, not in a way of you don't do this, but in a way of with empathy. And then be open to your partner's suggestions. That's going to be an interesting adventure for you. But this is, and it's kind of like looking at it as sexuality being, because you study sexuality and you've written about it and you do research about it. It's an evolution like anything else, like your physical well-being, like your mental well-being.
Absolutely.
It's not a finish line. Like you've got to look at it like something we can like expand on and evolve together. Otherwise, you go downhill, right?
That's fast. Because something like jealousy, when it hits in that negative way, it consumes you. It consumes you, and it makes people. I mean, the internet is rife with, companies selling spyware that you can put on your partner's phone and your computer, and all these things to find out what's really happening. And you know what? Unfortunately, if you look and you don't find things, you're gonna, instead of saying, oh, well, maybe I'm wrong, you're going to say, oh, that person's hidden it deeper. And so it sucks you in, and it takes all that energy that you could spend having great sex with your partner and having intimate moments with your partner that are inexplicably beautiful. You're now sitting in the gutter having these horrible, horrible self-fulfilling prophecies. And when your partner finds out that you've been spying on them, the trust is gone, everything. And again, this is where relationships break down.
Totally. Dr. Jim, thank you so much for your presence on our show, bringing your expertise and your humor and what you love to talk about in a forum where we can all kind of learn and take actionable steps to help improve our relationships. Thank you very much. And I hope you're going to join us again if the topic keeps coming up.
Sure. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks, Dr. Nima.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, man. Bye-bye.
Wowza. So interesting topic. And what I wanted to kind of close off with is this is a pandemic. Most of the clients that come to us with these breakdowns because of infidelity. And like I said, infidelity is either a way out of the relationship or a way back in. You must decide. I didn't really imagine myself talking about this. I mean, for God's sakes, I'm a chiropractor. What the heck right do I have talking about this? But as my practice over 18 years has evolved to really helping people going upstream with who they are with respect to, their positioning in the universe, how their intentions for their relationships. And I realized that how we show up within ourselves and how we are able to view ourselves in the mirror, how freely self-expressed we are and powerful and free in our relationships impacts our health. And so if I'm only dealing with the end stages of that, then I didn't feel like I was making a big enough impact, big enough difference. And few years ago, I just decided I wanted to go deeper. And it's led me down this path of talking about infidelity, because this seems to be one of the greatest constraints that break down our relationships, and it can be resolved. And my own personal situation is, I didn't believe that I had the capacity to have a committed monogamous relationship. I didn't believe that I had the capacity. What I realized was I didn't have an ability to have intimacy with myself. In fact, I was wearing a mask and I was pretending and I was performing, and it was all about getting external approval because I didn't have the ability to see myself. And when I took these steps, like everything, this model that I'm showing you was basically what I had to go through in my own healing journey, the discoveries that I made in my own recovery that had me absolutely certain that I'm able to make a commitment, absolutely desiring a monogamous, not necessarily monogamous, but a committed partnership with somebody who, with an open mind, like I have an absolute openness to whatever, because I have such a deep awareness of who I am, what I can offer. I'm handling my insecurities and I'm taking responsibility for them. I'm not making them somebody else's responsibility. And I truly believe that I am becoming more ready for that partnership. And so those people who have a lack of ability to commit, a lack of an ability to be intimate, who've been lying and pretending and having affairs and one relationship breakdown after another, I want you to know it can transform. And the path to victory is healing that nervous system, clearing your past resentments towards others, maybe your father or mother who had, infidelity, and you're basically, transferring everything over and you're embodying them and you're merging with them, as they say in family constellations. And you don't know how to learn how to dance with your dark passenger. By learning all of those and learning empathic communication, as Dr. Jim shared, with a commitment and a community around you, you literally can upgrade your intimacy and take that relationship that was toxic and turn it into something healthy, because you've now rewired consistently, and I'm a work in progress, it's a work in progress. You've rewired and shifted that relationship with yourself. So those couples who are stuck in relationship limbo because of an infidelity they haven't yet resolved, please let me know if this has been relevant for you. Send me a private message. If you have any questions, you could qualify for a free intimacy audit where we sit down and we go over what's been going on, and you're in this limbo state. Should I stay? Should I go? And by applying the work on the other side of this work, you'll be able to make a conscious, courageous, bold decision to your next step, your next move. Not necessarily in resentment and hatred, but in love. And that's possible if you upgrade your intimacy. And I love teaching this stuff. Join us every single week, Wednesdays at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern. Usually it's an hour long, and we talk about neuroscience, we talk about infidelity, we talk about your triggers, your activations, your past resentments, we talk about guilt and shame. And what would you love for us to talk about? Do you have any questions? I would love to dedicate a show to it if it's relevant for you. Wanted to say thank you to all of you who've been following along, sending messages, letting me know that these shows have been making an impact for you. This is my goal and my vision, to spread this message around so that people can have deeper, intimate connections with themselves, so that they can then transform their business, transform their relationships, and most importantly, it impacts your health. Your health is impacted with your ability to connect intimately with yourself and other people. So don't take it lightly, and we will see you at the next perfect time.